Hello, everyone. Welcome to Kvetchfest. I'm Jen.
And I'm Debbie.
Today, we're going to be talking about a few different things. One of them is information gathering, how we get our technology, and how it's changed since my mom was my age. I think a lot of things around that are we're going to talk about how we get our news and how people got it 30 years ago, how people get it today mostly, maybe a little bit about AI and our thoughts about that, and a few other things about technology then and now. I think it'll be a really interesting conversation, and I'm so curious about having this conversation and what it's going to bring up because I'm a millennial who grew up kind of on the cusp of two worlds where second grade, 7, 8 years old, that's when I remembered my first kind of computer experience in a classroom setting. And I remember teaching you, Mom, how to type a little bit when I was a little bit older, maybe. But then I also remember having a computer in the 80s when you were running your pizza business. But I don't remember it being used for very much. At least as a kid, that's my memory. It was like that game where you ping pong and green and a black background. I'm sure you used it for like spreadsheets, maybe. I don't remember it being that exciting. And then we got our own computer at some point during my elementary school years. But before that, we had something, and I don't remember what it was called. It was like ITV. Do you remember that? What was that?
First of all, let's dial back. So when you say 30 years ago, I feel like I was in elementary school, but 30 years ago was not that long ago for me because I was your age.
No, I
So, well, I
know.
was a
That's
little
what
bit
I'm
older than
saying.
you. Yeah.
Yeah,
So when you
it's not
say
that
30
long
years
ago.
ago, I think, oh, what was it like when I was a kid? It wasn't like that when I was a kid. That was like way long before that. Anyway, it's hard to believe that that was 30 years ago. We got our first computer as franchisees to a restaurant corporation. We went to some kind of convention dealy thing, and somebody there was teaching franchisees how to put their inventories on spreadsheets on computers using DOS. And we came home with all of this, and I hated every single minute of it because it was more work to try to create. Back in those days, you had to create everything on your own. So you had to create the spreadsheet, and then you had to figure out how to put the information in the spreadsheet. And it was easier for me to just do it the old-fashioned way in a ledger. So that computer, which was a desktop, obviously back then, and I really don't remember the name of it, but I probably will after I get off of the recording, basically just sat there because it was so much work trying to create your own documents to tailor them to your own use that it didn't seem time worthy to me. It wasn't until much later on where they were creating programs that we just really had to click and click things to figure things out. And so it's super convenient now as opposed to what it was like in the 80s when we got our first computer. So, and
Hmm.
it was expensive, and I felt guilty because we had this expensive computer and a printer that you had to put the printer paper in with the little holes on the side, which you could tear off. And they were super loud, and everything just took what seemed to me a much longer than me just being able to make an inventory list and figure out how much was used during the week and that kind of thing. So I pretty much abandoned that when I realized it was more time consuming to actually use the computer than it was to actually get the job done paper and pencil. So
Right.
I don't think it was until the late 90s that we actually got another desktop.
Hmm.
And that's when I put that in the kitchen, and you guys were using it for IM and
Instant
for,
messenger.
right, and
Yeah.
for creating like Word documents. And
Yeah.
you're typing your papers
And
on
maybe a
that.
little bit of research, but the internet
Right.
was not really that great.
No, I remember being at your grandpa's house, Grandpa Jerry, and I remember he had the computer and he was showing us the internet, and I thought to myself, oh, so this is retail on a computer. That's what because it was just a bunch of things to purchase and a bunch of ads, and not even as many ads as there are today. Now we're overcome with ads.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm not really that interested in that, right? Now,
Hmm.
certainly now I'm interested in purchasing things on the internet because it's super convenient, it comes to my house. I can return them. Sometimes the company doesn't even want the thing back. I mean, it's so disposable, and there's so much, and they're making so much money and whatever. But I just initially remember thinking, I thought this was going to be like something really amazing, like information all connected, which it is now. And it was just in its infancy, but initially I thought saw it as I'm going to just use this vernacular, a mall online. That's what I
Yeah,
first thought of it, and I was like completely disinterested with that, right? Until it
right.
became more sophisticated, and it was, it was more something that I would
Usable.
actually want to use. Yeah, more usable. Right.
Totally. It just seemed like
Right.
pieces back then, but not the whole puzzle together yet.
Right. And so I didn't really get what it was like, but I have to give kudos to your grandfather for being sort of an early adopter. Never
Hmm.
thought of it until just now that he was
Sure.
willing to figure out how this all went down.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember making sure that the computer, like that, must have really solved a lot of problems, in the kitchen so I could have a kind of a bird's eye view as to what you may have been looking at while I was, cooking dinner or, right? It was like in
Yeah,
the
because there
hub.
wasn't parental controls yet, I don't think.
No, no. But then once laptops became the norm, you guys were holed up in your bedroom with your laptops and all bets were off, right?
I mean, I didn't get a laptop until he bought me one for college.
Yeah, I guess
So
so.
it's before I left that
But your
I had.
brother was like 5 years ahead of you.
Right.
So
True.
he was already going through that and right. And so
Yeah.
I think with you, I realized that technology was different than when I was a kid. Well, let me dial back a second. So we had phones that were attached to walls. And if our parents wanted to, they got us extra long cords so we could walk further away from the phone and have a conversation, maybe sit on the couch or go to the
Right.
dining room table. Then, when I was 13, I was allowed to have a phone in my bedroom, but it was still connected to the household phone. So it wasn't like I had to wait until somebody was not using the phone in order to use the phone,
Right. You didn't
right?
have your own line.
No. And then there was all kinds of kitschy things that they did where you could have another person online, you could on the phone online, but on the line, that's where online comes from. On the phone with you, and you could do a three-way conversation, or you would hear a click because somebody was trying to call in and you would have to hang up to let them in.
Hmm.
That kind of stuff was kind of groovy. And then we had the cordless phone where you could just walk around and I mean, I remember cooking many dishes and having conversations with
Oh,
the
yeah.
phone stuck between my shoulder and
Stuck
my
between your
ear.
shoulder and your
And I
ear.
thought
Yeah.
this is awesome because what a convenience. I could walk around and do stuff and have this. And then something happened that I didn't expect to happen. And this was, you're right, this is when you were in high school and your friend that you had grown up with came to the door. And I opened the door and I said, "Hi." And then you came bouncing downstairs and said, "Oh yeah, we're gonna go do this and blah blah." And I'm like, "When did all that happen?" And that was because it was all on text messages. So there were no phones ringing anymore. Nobody was talking out loud. And so the plans were being made, which what I considered below the surface. And then I
Underground plans.
realized, uh-oh, I need to figure out another way to figure out what's going on. I remember that being a big aha moment for me because
Oh,
there was
wow.
you were making all these plans, but I wasn't involved in it because I used to hear them being
I
made.
don't even remember texting until college, but I was texting in high school. That's wild. I don't really remember
Yes,
that. I do a little bit, but it wasn't that efficient back then necessarily because it was
one letter at a
keep.
time.
Well, yeah, because it was like it was not like keypads today, or
No,
not even today because it's different, but it was the flip phones, and then you had to press through each letter until you got the letter. I can't remember what it's called, but it was like very slow and
yeah,
very tiny screen. So
right.
I don't really remember. I did it, but I don't remember really making plans. That's funny. I guess I
No,
did though. That's
you
weird.
did. And you got really
Whoa.
good at punching numbers quickly.
Did I? Oh
And
my
it was
God.
before you didn't have to have a flip phone for that because before that it was just the keypad on the phone and you used that and the writing came across the little screen. And
Oh,
then we had to
weird.
flip forward with the QWERTY board
QWERTY word, yeah.
and that became much easier.
Yeah.
But that was a big aha moment for me that my kids in my house were making arrangements and I didn't had no
No
idea,
clue.
right? Because I couldn't
That's
hear it
terrifying.
happening. And I don't think you were doing it to keep me out of it. It would just
Yeah.
was what was happening at the time. And
Right, right.
we hadn't talked about it yet,
Right.
right? So
Yeah.
then I think I had to have a conversation like, if you're going to text blah blah and you're going to make plans, I would like to know what's going on before you just leave the house.
Oh my God, that brought me back to my 14-year-old self. That tone that you just did.
There was a tone.
No, well, I don't know. It's not a tone, maybe. It's just the exact vernacular you used with me. I was like, oh my gosh. Wow, yeah, I remember being parented by you at that age. Whoa.
Wow,
That's
that's funny.
exactly what you used to say
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah, so I think the technology, I mean, as much as you want to keep up with it and all that, I don't think that you're necessarily ready in that moment for what it actually means in that moment. And there's
Right.
a certain moment where you realize, oh, I have to make a shift now because of this, because the way they're communicating with friends, and you're not part of that. All the time I was growing up, it was very hard to keep a conversation private when I was a kid around my
Yeah.
parents. There was no privacy. The phone was centrally located until I got one in my bedroom. And but you could still hear people talking. And there was something very, I don't know, I found that sort of a content feeling hearing my mom on the phone and all that kind of happening in the household. And then with text messaging, everything went really quiet.
Yeah. I know it's
Uh-huh.
weird, right? It's
It
like all these
is.
kind of private conversations that you never know about
Right.
whizzing past you in the technosphere. I don't know. I'm just making shit up. But,
That's a no, I think that's a term.
you know, I remember having that thought when I was in college because I think maybe this was maybe my first realization about the term FOMO, where my friends would be in the house together, my roommates and I, and they would be having text conversations and getting pinged while I was like sitting there doing my homework and stuff and feeling like, oh my gosh, like you're having all these conversations with people that I know, but I will never know what those conversations are about because they're personal between you two and your relationship. And then I have relationships with both of those people. It's just interesting to me. I just remember feeling like, oh my gosh, yeah, people that I know are having all these other relationships with text messaging.
Right.
And feeling like, oh my gosh, that was like the first time that I felt like, do I have enough people to text? Which was a weird feeling to be having with that kind of newish technology, I guess.
Well, I think also what was interesting to me because I think about I'm channeling your grandma Carolee right now because when we were at home with the phone attached to the wall and the phone would ring, we would just saunter over and pick up the phone unless we knew that it was something that we were waiting for, right?
Right.
Then everybody was excited and would run to the phone. Somehow, when we got phones we could hold in our hands and put in our purses, I just recall there seemed to be a sense of urgency. And I remember my mother, with the phone would go off and it was in her purse, and she didn't carry like these little small bags. She would carry like these big bags with a lot of stuff in it, and she
Huge
would be
bags.
frantically trying to get to the bottom of her purse for the phone. And I'm thinking, why is she so frantic?
I know.
Why is there a different sense of urgency when you have a small phone at your disposal than when it was attached to the wall?
Yeah.
And I really don't know what that phenomenon is. Maybe they're studying it. Maybe somebody else can speak to it. But I just know I remember that with her because there are times where I feel the same way. That, oh, I have to get to the phone. They're calling me, but I don't necessarily feel that way when it's attached to like a handset. Oh, look
Oh,
at
that's
that. Is that weird?
hilarious.
And that's my
Or-
landline, which never rings. So I think I need to take care of that.
Whoa, they know what's going on.
Okay.
What were we talking about?
The phone
Oh,
ringing,
the urgency
basically.
of getting the phone.
Right.
Yeah, the urgency to pick up the phone. But then, of course, in my generation, there's not so much urgency.
I knew you were going to say
Um,
that.
yeah. But I also think that I think we're just overcome with so much communication from all different areas now that it's very overwhelming. And that's why you see so many people who have 400 text messages. I don't understand. I don't like to see all that. I want to just reply as soon as I can, just because, unless I need some time to think about it. But usually I try to reply pretty quickly because I don't like that lingering over my head. But I also think text messaging has made maybe me shyer in a way, because we're going back to talking about the landline. I would have to pick up the phone, dial the number, call my friend's house, and then be like, "Hi, Mrs. or Mr. So and so, is XYZ there?" And then they'd be like, "Yeah, hey, so and so, come, like, they're on the phone for you. Pick up."
Right.
Or they'd be like, "Oh, how's school going?" And I'd be like, "Okay, it's fine."
Yeah.
You have to, but that creates kind of how you communicate in public, right? It helps you become a communicator. Now we miss all that.
We don't
Now we
have the
just go
social
direct to the
graces.
source.
We don't
Yeah.
have the social graces. We don't have to worry about those social graces on
Yeah.
one hand. On the other hand, we also don't have to make small talk if we don't want to.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I was
People don't like
terrified
that.
of parents. I never wanted to talk to the parents necessarily unless they were really overly, I knew them for a long time or something, but it's always scary to talk to the parents.
Right.
So it was always nerve-wracking to call someone on a landline.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember feeling that way, but I think it's because I only called the houses of people that I already knew their parents, and so I
Mm,
didn't that didn't bother me so
yeah.
much. Yeah, it's so different. It feels different. I just the feeling I just got when I was thinking about that was when I was growing up, I felt like the time I spent with my friends was more like a warm hug because we were
Hmm.
actually in people's homes talking to everybody, and we didn't have any devices
Yeah.
except for maybe a TV set or a radio
Hmm.
or a record player. Or like, how many times in your experience, and this is a very dear experience to me, how many times in your experience did you go to a friend's house and somebody played an instrument for you?
Oh, probably pretty often, actually.
Oh, really? Okay.
Well, in some way, I mean, I don't know. I mean, well, yes and no. I mean, people were playing instruments, or we were, I don't know, playing video games probably too. Like it was either video games or someone messing around with their guitar or something. But maybe not so often, but still maybe often for my generation. I don't know how much that happens now.
Yeah, no, I think there are certain people who are, I notice kids who are drummers walk around with their sticks,
Yeah.
and people who are guitarists like to, during the summertime, especially kids are walking around with guitars, they're going to the park and doing that. But I remember going to one of my very close friends' houses, and they had a piano, and we would just sit in the living room while she played the piano, and we
Yeah.
would give her requests, and she would play them. And I don't think about that happening as much
Yeah. Well,
nowadays.
I'm also not the target audience for this part of the conversation because I
Right,
was a
right.
musical theater kid. So, of course, all the drama nerds were,
Oh, okay, that's right.
we
It
were
was
sitting
different for
around the
you.
piano playing and singing our musical theater songs. So,
Right.
especially
That's
after
true.
or during a cast party or something. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm not.
Yeah, that's different. I wasn't a musical theater kid, and this was
Yeah.
just a person who learned how to play the piano and was willing to play
Yeah.
for her friends or even just for me,
Hmm.
which was
Yeah.
really nice. And there
Hmm.
wasn't any distraction other than maybe a mom coming in asking us if we wanted a snack or something to eat, right? There wasn't even a TV set on,
Yeah.
right? It was just those moments.
Well, and I think too, I was talking to my partner about this. I feel like time is moving fast. Of course, I think a lot of adults feel that way, but I think being on my phone, it's kind of like lost hours spent scrolling, and I think that's kind of taken me away from my immediate reality, and it makes time feel like it's moving faster because I'm not as present when I'm on my phone. And I definitely think it's nice to have your phone and be on it, but it's also, I think, causing issues for me too. Just because it's a distraction and it's taking me away from spending quality time with people I care about. Because it's so easy to just go on your phone and do whatever you want to do and zone out. And that sounds really peaceful and nice because you don't have to deal with anybody else. But it's
Right.
also because it's not work, right? It's just easy. Whereas even with your partner, or your friends, it's like, oh, you have to plan something, you have to make plans, then you have to follow through with the plans. It becomes a chore just to do the thing. Whereas I would prefer that though, because being on my phone is not that fulfilling at the end of the day.
True. I mean, unless you have something of intention. There's a little bit of relaxation for me when I get on my phone because I can just there's certain things I want to do and I try to do those things and I try to contain it, but I don't always
Hmm.
contain it. I notice that time will go further away and now that I'm not working, I have to be careful that I'm not just on my device the whole day until
Yeah.
my spouse comes home. That's because that's like, what did you do all day? And he doesn't say that, but I think to myself, what did I do all day? So I
Right.
try to balance the chores, the phone, the things I want to do in one big sort of pie chart in my head
Yeah.
and try to segregate it so that I know that I haven't spent too much time on my phone. But depending upon what you're looking at, there's some compelling things. And if I
Hmm.
read something and I don't know, I'm not familiar with the thing I read, then I research it while in that moment, which is something that I couldn't do when I was a kid. I mean, when I think back to those times, and even when you guys were growing up, having to drive to a library to
Hmm.
find resources and stay at the library because they wouldn't let you take those resources out of the library
Right.
and copy things down pencil and paper
Hmm.
and then bring them home and then turn them into something your teacher asked you to turn them into. That was a much more, it almost seemed a much more social event in a way
Hmm.
because I was in the car generally with a sibling and my mother, and then we were at the library with the librarian and other people that were there, and then I did my thing, and then I came home and I was still at home with my family doing my whole thing, right? And I
Yeah.
also remember projects that I did as a young person that friends of our family would help me with.
Hmm.
If they had resources that we didn't have or they had more knowledge about something, they would we would do it. It became like a group thing, to
Right.
help me.
Yeah.
And so I think of those times as super enjoyable. They're
Hmm.
fond memories of being with other adults and other kids while I was doing this stuff. And I'm not sure how collaborative being able to one touch your resources without anybody else really needing to help you, right?
Right.
When you get to that point. I mean, when you're in
Hmm.
elementary school, you still need a little guidance with that, and you
Hmm.
get that, and they build collaboration in the classroom. But it's totally, I feel like it's a lot different. It's a lot more convenient now,
It
but I
is.
almost feel it's a lot less, in some ways, it's a lot less communal
I agree.
than maybe it was in the past.
Technology can be really isolating. It's a great resource for a lot of accessibility reasons, but it's also, yeah, it kind of creates isolation because you could basically stay in your house and get everything you need in a lot of ways. You can order DoorDash, you can get Instacart, you can order clothes online. Everything gets delivered to you. So,
Right.
in that way, you're right. I mean, it's, yeah, way less collaborative and communal. I was at this bookstore over the weekend and they didn't have the book I wanted. And so I went up to ask about it. And then they were like, oh, we can order that for you. And I was like, oh, yeah, you're a bookstore. You can order things.
Right.
Totally forgot that
Right.
that's a thing. Because on the one hand, I'm trying to move away from Amazon and it's so
Right.
convenient and it's
Right.
got such a stronghold on us. But also, it's like, okay, well, yeah, I'll order it from this, bookstore that's local to my area, and they'll like get the money for that, and that's
Right.
great.
Right.
So, but I totally forget about that because the immediacy of wanting a book is go online, buy it wherever I can, and get it shipped to me. So
Sure.
instead of going through, which I love to do, go to bookstores and go smell the books, or go to the library, which I also love the library, and be in those communal spaces with people. Yeah, it's definitely so different now. My life is so different now because I can do everything on my computer and I don't have to leave the house, and it's kind of scary how easy that is to do.
Yeah, well, my mother used to say she missed living in New York back in the day because everything was delivered to you in New York, even prior to the
Mm,
digital world we live in. because
Yeah.
it was just set up like that. And people, she
Right.
would say to me, people don't have to really leave their apartments if they don't want to, because they can get breakfast, lunch, and dinner, they can get their laundry, they can get all these things, and they don't have to leave. And I'm like, wow. And so now we've kind of become this digitized New York in a way,
Mhm.
in her viewpoint, that we don't have to leave because everything can come to us. Of course, there's a price to pay for that, not only
Mhm.
monetarily, but also, like we were just saying, socially. There
Mhm.
is that price to pay. But I think it's fun. Honestly, I think that what's hilarious about the technology and the working situation is that people go to, let's say, a coffee house like Starbucks, where they are essentially plugged in and not conversing. But the reason they're there is because they want to be around people. They
Yes.
just don't necessarily want to communicate with them. So there's
Well,
all these people that are plugged in and tuned into something else, but they still want to have the feeling of community. So it's this weird intersection between the two.
yes, I totally understand what you're saying because I am this person. I have a desktop computer and I want a laptop so that I can do that exact thing. Go to the library and work on my stuff, but not be in my house because it gets really kind of sad. I'm missing out on being out in the world because I'm tied to this desktop computer, which is awesome, but it's also, yeah, like it's funny how you think about that. I'm like, do I really need a laptop just so I can go sit at a cafe? But then it's like, maybe,
Right, right,
maybe
right.
I do. It's a silly thought process, but you're right. These very isolating machines that also help to connect us. But then we want to be in the 3D real world, and so we go out with this device to go be in that 3D real world without actually connecting with people in that 3D real world.
Yeah, no, it's
It's
fascinating to
weird.
me because in essence, they could stay at home and order in the coffee or just drive over, go through a
Hmm.
drive-through and come back home, but they don't want to do that. They want to be in the space with people.
Hmm.
And which I can understand in a way, because when there's those moments where you need to take a break from what you're doing, you can look up and see things, and
Hmm.
that's a distraction. Whereas at home, you've
Yeah.
seen the same thing over and over again, not so much of a distraction.
Right.
So it does speak to the fact that if people are plugging in and not really talking to each other and still want to be together, there's a reason people want to be together.
Yes.
That experience has always, for a long time, I've thought about. I don't know if I've articulated it, but I certainly observed it. So, and I don't think for me, because I'm a people person generally, but there's some introversion I do understand that I have, not growing up with any of that, it's different because I was always immersed with people all the time. We
Right.
visited people, we had conversation. I was a kid listening to conversation of grown-ups. I heard the conversation on the telephone. We went to occasionally, not like the atmosphere is now, but we went to restaurants occasionally. Mostly we're in people's homes, family,
Hmm.
and there was a lot more community around me because I wasn't looking at anything else. So I had to look at people's faces and listen to their voices and watch their watch their idiosyncratic behavior. And I remember it. I remember, certain uncles and how they used to eat and all this stuff. And I don't know that kids have that same experience now because they're so focused on the device, and they're
Hmm.
missing out on all this really rich nuances of life that they won't get if they don't look up. I don't know. I know that might sound really old school, and I do notice that some parents are now bringing into restaurants no more devices. They're bringing in these boards that are all tactile
Hmm.
for their toddlers to play with and move things around rather than be on screen time. And I
Yeah.
think that's really fantastic. When
Yeah.
we took you guys to the restaurant, you guys made things with the stuff on the table. I mean,
Yeah.
but there was a lot more, interaction, I think, than for some people today, all across the board, not just kids.
Yeah. Totally.
So that's the downside of technology. But I think the upside is what we talked about earlier, the amazing amount of convenience that
Yeah.
it has brought to our world. And we just have to, like anything else, there's boundaries. So I think you started out talking about how you got news or how we individually got news in the different
Yes.
ages that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
And mostly, I think for me, there were three sources of news when I was growing up and as I got older, and that would be TV, if you had one in your house. And I had some friends who didn't have a TV in their house, newspapers,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I guess word of mouth,
Yeah.
people talking about what was going on currently and having conversations
Yeah.
about it. Oh, and radio. I guess that would be the maybe the fourth before word of mouth. So yeah, so I think that's initially how I got my news. I think like any young person, at first when I was younger, I don't think I thought news was all that important. But as you get more mature and age into things, you become more interested and you're
Mm-hmm.
willing to listen to something that might sound dry.
Yeah.
And I still, I can tell you right now, and this has been a conversation I've had with my husband, I still resent the breaking news phenomenon
Okay.
because everything is not breaking news.
Mm-hmm.
People should know now that that was just a ploy to get them to come to the TV set. When I was a kid, if there was breaking news, it was called a special report, and they would
Yeah.
break into the TV set for a special report, and everybody was like, "What the heck happened?" But not every news item is breaking news.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really fed up with that, honestly. If I'm going to fetch, I would fetch about that. I think that that is ridiculous, and you need to stop doing
Fear
that.
mongering.
Yeah, I just don't like that at all.
Yeah.
And I also don't like when they say you're only going to see it on, on CBS or whatever the news is. Like they're so proud of showing that car crash. I mean, it's horrible. So
Yes.
there's news and then there's news. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
not a big fan of local news because most of the local news I hear about are all the tragedies, the shootings and the car accidents and those things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just don't like to listen to that before I go to bed. But I find myself being in a room when it's on. And so then I try to do I'm half listening and watch and doing something else usually at the same time. But I don't particularly care for that kind of news. National news is a different thing. And I listen to that. But the breaking news thing, I hate it. And they've dialed back a little bit from people talking over each other, the pundits, because I didn't like that either. Nobody can say anything. You're just all bantering over each other, and I didn't care for that at all. So
Yeah.
reading a newspaper is cumbersome. So I'm kind of glad I can read a newspaper now on my phone.
Sure. Yeah.
I think,
I know the opening up a newspaper and then trying to get to the right page was always confusing to
yeah,
me.
yeah, and your fingers get dirty and all that stuff. So,
Sure.
I mean, I understand that some people might really still like that, but
Mm-hmm.
I would prefer to read the news on my phone. I think that that's been a lot different because for me, the news didn't come in as rapidly as it comes in now. There wasn't a 24-hour news cycle.
Right.
It ended and the
Mm-hmm.
day ended. Everybody went to sleep and we found out what happened the next day. Now,
Yeah.
just the amount of news coming at you every flipping second
Yeah.
is a
You're
lot.
inundated. Yeah.
Right, that's the word I wanted to use, inundated. But I think that what bothers me even more than that is that we have all this fake news. And
Yeah.
when I was a kid, and let's say that most of it was not fake, for argument's sake,
Mm-hmm.
I felt like you could trust, I still feel like you can trust journalists,
Mm-hmm.
but you could trust the news services were not trying to give you an impression of something that wasn't really what was happening. So
Yeah.
the amount of bias there is right now is makes it really difficult, except if on certain news channels, and we know who those are, that we know we should stay away from them, but some people don't. And the conspiracy theories and all the stuff that's generated online that's not true and it's all concocted is
Mm-hmm.
very disconcerting. And it's critical that we start putting some brakes on that, but I don't know if we ever will. It's
Yeah.
gotten kind of out of control.
Well, they haven't put any laws in place to for social media. And that's a
Right,
big piece of it because even
right,
some people like you and I who are, I don't know, critical thinkers, we try to get our news sources from diversified voices and we listen to all different types of news sources. I still think it's kind of scary now for me to think, oh, is this a trusted and verifiable resource? And how do you decipher that when also there's AI? And I'm
right,
here for AI. I mean, I think it's cool and I use it. I'm not here for it taking people's creative work. I'm not here for it just to make more work for humans. I think it should be making work easier for us. But there's no regulations on this stuff yet. And going back to what you were saying about me texting my friends, you were like, "Oh, that's a new thing that I haven't figured out a solution for this yet. I have to problem solve it as it's happening." And I think that's what we're seeing with a lot of technology, and especially social media and AI, is that we're creating these things which are cool and interesting, but also problematic because we don't know what we don't know yet. And we're also not listening when we do find out and making changes or shifts for accommodating those things. So it gets really scary really quickly
Yeah,
with
I'm
all
wondering
these. Yeah.
what, yeah, no, I'm wondering why we don't stop beforehand, even if we have the ability, and say, okay, we need to legislate blah, blah, blah first.
Yeah.
And I know the wheels of legislation are slow moving, but there, I think that part of legislation needs to kind of ramp itself up because you're right. We don't know what we don't know. We've got the dark net, and we've got all these things that are happening because there are going to be people in our society all the time that are going to be doing things they shouldn't do for monetary gain, for personal satisfaction, for harming other people. That's just a fraction of our populace. And those of us that are not those people and are creating these things need to step back and say, wait a minute, is this something we should be implementing right now? But I think the barn door is open and everybody's been let out. And
Yeah.
so now it's like trying to grab everything back and say, wait, 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 we have to do something about this.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
that's, I was telling you, I think in a conversation earlier, that online you get all these advertisements. And so there's this company that makes pots and pans, and I'm like, oh, I kind of like to have that, but it's kind of so expensive. And I see Oprah Winfrey is hawking the set of pots and pans for really cheap, and I'm like, wait a minute. So the critical thinker that I
Yeah.
am, I say, wait, is this really Oprah Winfrey doing this? And I go on to the internet, and of course, it's not her.
Yeah, it's a
They
scam.
put her image, and it's not even her image, it's a video of her. They're dubbing in her
Selfie.
what she's saying with her actual voice, and there's no, this is a scam. So,
Yeah.
but how many people aren't going to do that?
Do that.
And
Yeah.
I'm not saying, wow, that was such a wonderful thing, and wow, you're such a deep thinker. I'm just saying, guys, step back a second and said, really, does Oprah Winfrey really need to hawk pots and pans?
Right.
And so then I went on and I saw that it was a scam. But there's so many of these things that how do you know what is a real thing and what's not a real thing? And
Yeah.
in school, when we're teaching kids about literacy, computer literacy, social media literacy, I don't know that as a teacher I can be effective enough to explain to them what a good website is, how to figure out if this is a good website, how to compare it to another website that's good. I know that teachers nowadays, especially in high school and college, AI is a thing. They can't get kids to write their own original essays. So now they're teaching kids what an AI essay looks like and the difference between the AI generated essay and a person writing the essay. And they're starting to look at what the differences are and explain to kids why it's so important that you write your own thing. The way that you even teach in your classroom has to change
Yeah.
because you can't send home kids and say, okay, I want you to write a 5-page essay on blah blah, because they're going to go immediately to the computer. You have to say, we're going to be writing this in class without any devices. I'll give you have access to a thesaurus and a dictionary and maybe some sources that I approve of, and that's what you're going to write your paper on. And
Yeah.
maybe only have them do writing practices, and certain papers you only grade when they're a larger assignment, when you've given them the parameters like that.
That's so
So because
hard.
you can't, yeah, I mean, come on.
Big part of my college education was writing. I mean, I had to
Yeah,
write so many things for my portfolios because we had to turn in portfolios instead of. So I think it's not just one piece of education. It's like you have to help students see that there's more you can show, and there's all different ways that we can showcase our learning, not just through
right,
essays, of course, but
right,
yeah,
sure.
it's tough. I had to write so many essays by hand, by hand or typing,
Right.
and it's not easy to use your brain, especially when, yeah, there's so much you have to like learn how to write these essays. You have to learn how to consolidate information and form an opinion, and give your points and all of that, and a intro and a conclusion. I mean, I remember taking AP classes and my teacher took me aside and was like, "Look, you're a free thinker." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Already that means that you don't think I'm cut out to be in an AP class. But whatever, that was her opinion. But or free spirit, I think she said. But it's because I just wasn't, there was a 50-minute class and then I'm supposed to write, a couple page essay on a question. I mean, I had a hard time with that. That doesn't mean I wasn't good at it. It just meant that under pressure I had a hard time. Anyway, I digress. But yeah, I think it's going to be really tricky going forward with the technology and how it can help and hurt us. Because, I mean, I'm over here, I can't be against AI when I'm using it to help me write my cover letters, when I'm using it to help me formulate my resumes to beat the ATS systems for getting a job. I mean, that we're causing and creating problems at the same time that we're not able to get out of because the technology has kind of overrun the job market in this way. And you don't have enough people going through these resumes, and it creates all these issues. So I can't be against AI, especially when it comes to students too. Of course, I want students to learn in the, I don't know, maybe this isn't the right word, but like appropriate ways, and I want them to learn in ways that we have to accommodate now this new technology, I guess, which makes it really tricky. I really do. It complicates matters.
Well, it does, and I think that you're talking about the job market and interviews and resumes. I think that maybe corporations that are and smaller companies that need people to work for them need to think about different ways they need to interview.
Yeah.
They're going to have to try something different because you're right. Everybody's going to be doing what you're doing,
Yeah.
and which is perfectly fine. There's no reason not to. But
Yeah.
the people who are doing the interviewing are going to need to figure out how to get around, use that, and then also find another way to figure out who the person is
Yeah.
that they're
Humanize the
actually.
process.
Right, right.
Yeah, because learning how to write a resume or learning how to write an essay, you have to understand how to do that. And then I think that's when you get the privilege to use other technology to help. If you're just using it and not proofreading it or going over it or really plugging in your own personal things or personality, then that's where it gets unusable, right? So,
Right.
yeah, it's complicated because AI can be a great tool to help you brainstorm or help you get organized. But at the end of the day, you still need to do the work to make sure that it's in your voice and it's what you want people to see and you feel proud of it,
Right.
all of that stuff. So
Right.
yeah, it's like, yeah, learning the rules to break them, basically.
Well, yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's sort of how I parented. I wanted you guys to have the foundation before I started telling you what the different permutations were,
Yeah. And then
right?
then I just broke all the rules, didn't I? No, I'm kidding.
I don't think so, but I think you have to start with guidelines and then you can, branch out. But
Yeah.
you're right, it's all about voice, and that's what you need to teach kids because kids don't understand what you mean by that. When you say, well, I've been talking to educators recently and they're all going back to school, and it's like, I know you didn't write this. Well, how do you know? Because it doesn't sound like you.
Yeah.
And it's a rare person, especially in elementary school, who can write, a rare student in elementary who can write and you can actually hear them. And
Hmm.
I've had a handful of students each year who can do that, and most of them can't because you have to mature into that process
Hmm.
and it takes time. And I don't know if you've ever done this, but have you ever written anything and then you go back and read it years later, you go, oh, I wrote that?
Hmm.
And you can hear yourself, but you're like, wow, I didn't realize I sounded like that then,
Yeah,
right? And I
totally.
think kids don't really know what you mentioned what voice is, and that's the difference between AI and you.
Yeah.
And that's why they need to be able to see the difference and hear the difference, read it, hear it, understand it, so that they can start using it, as you said, as a foundation and then jump off from that. But
Exactly.
certainly AI it can be used in positive ways in the classroom, and I'm hoping that that's what is happening because as educators, we can't pretend things aren't out there. We have to actually bring them into the classroom, explain them, and show them whether or not it's worthy of being used or not.
Totally.
I
Yes,
mean, that's
exactly.
kind of how. how the world should be. So what about, so we were talking about news and fake news and not knowing if this is a reliable source and how do we find out about that and AI. And I guess another bias, well, there's bias,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yeah,
there, you need to know what the bias is. So it's op-eds and things like that. When you read those, these are fine. But when you're listening to what you think is your local news or national news and you can't hear the bias, that's a problem,
exactly. Yeah.
right? Or when
Mm-hmm.
they try to tell you it's fair and balanced and you know, come on, it isn't. But you don't know that if you don't listen to more than one thing.
Exactly.
You have to be able to listen to more than one thing.
We'll see you next time on the next episode, wherever you get your
Yes, are you
podcasts.
really? But wait a minute, are you really my daughter, or is this your AI identity?
How can I prove it to you?
You just dialed it in, or is this the real deal?
Yeah. Well, I don't have like a weird number of shoulders or
A couple extra fingers?
a couple extra fingers. I mean, some people do in real life, but like,
Well, that's true. But I know you don't, so that's why
yeah,
I said
there you
that.
go.